What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the BodyCompRx YouTube channel. My name is Jake,
I'm Jesus.
and today we're going to be talking about the top 5 exercises for your glutes. So last week we talked about the top 5 worst exercises for your glutes with a couple of honorable mentions and stuff like that. So, we won't keep you hanging. We'll actually give you our top 5 list of things to grow your glutes if that's something that you're looking to do. But just like that video, we want to go over the anatomy a little bit first to make sure that if you didn't see that video, you're still all caught up to speed. And understanding the anatomy is a good way to transition into why these exercises are good exercises for your glutes. So, Jesus, do you want to take us
Yep.
away with that?
Yeah, guys. So if you guys recall last video, we went over anatomy, but for the sake of this video, we're going to go ahead and talk about it again. If you didn't know, the glutes are made up of three different muscles, right? You have your glute minimus, glute medius, and glute maximus. Based off the names, you could tell that they have three different sizes. But essentially, what these three muscles do as a whole, they are known to do hip extension, which is your hips forward, right? So let's just say you're in seated position, but you bent over and you wanted to get back up into that seated position, you would do a hips extension and your glutes will be responsible for that. If you want to abduct your thigh, that is, take your leg and move it away from the midline. Basically, if you're doing a jumping jack, that is hip abduction, and your glutes are also responsible for that, right? And then you also have hip external rotation. Hip external rotation is if you had your feet pointed forward, right? Both toes are pointing forward right in front of you, and you wanted to have them point away from each other. That is hip external rotation.
Mhm.
Yeah. So with that said, now that we know our anatomy for the glutes, I think it's appropriate to jump right into our top 5 best glute exercises. So number one, we have hip thrust and single leg hip thrust, right? They're essentially the same movement, but different variations. Um, Hip thrust and single leg hip thrust, they're very great movement for growing your glutes because you start in that hip flex position, right? And like how I mentioned before in anatomy, you want to have your hips do a hip extension to utilize those glutes. So these two movements right here would be perfect for that.
Exactly. And some cues for you to help kind of understand how to best set up or get the most out of the exercise is to one, start with your heels under your knees. That's a really good place to start. Your upper back is going to be laid against a bench or a box or whatever you're doing your hip thrusts on. And then you just want to keep your chin tucked. So as you come up to the top, you want to make sure that you're not sticking your head back as you do it. This isn't good for your neck and your spine health. But as you go from the bottom to the top, you just want to squeeze your glutes to get you from that flex position up to that extended position and squeeze all the way through.
So at number two, we have hip abduction. Hip abduction is done with cable, right? There's different variations, but for the sake of this video, we did it with the cable. This movement is really important, and it's kind of like it's in the name, right? So if in the beginning I talked about your glutes being responsible for abducting the thigh, this movement is essentially just that, and that's why it's top 5 best exercises for glutes.
Yeah. And then the way that you set up for this is you want to keep a slight bend in both of the knees. And then you have the ankle cuff on the outside of the leg, whichever one you're deciding to work on. And then what you want to think about is the outside of your foot. So that side that has your pinky toe on it, you're going to be pushing out and up to the side with that. And then you're going to control it back in. And that's your hip abduction.
Yeah. And at number three, we have sumo deadlifts, right? Sumo deadlifts are perfect because, at the starting position, you are already naturally at a hip external rotation position, right? That is perfect because you're going to basically engage those glutes from the beginning. Then at the top of the movement, right? So once you lift the weight up, you're using your glutes to bring your hips forward. Therefore, sumo deadlifts are great for glute growing exercises.
Yeah, and then in comparison to a conventional deadlift where your feet are a little bit more narrow in stance, like Jesus said, by widening that stance and pointing your toes out, you're already helping the glutes with external rotation. And then by widening the stance, you're also shortening the range of motion, which is going to help take some of that load off of your low back and focus it more so on the glutes. So with that wider than shoulder width stance, you just want to keep your back flat. You're going to initiate the movement by picking up the weight. And then once you pass the knees, all I want you to think about is driving the hips forward and squeezing with the glutes. And that's how you get the most out of this exercise to train your glutes.
So at number 4, we have wide stance squats. Squats is another great one because when you're holding the weight and you go in the bottom position, you're at a hip flexion. To drive and bring up that weight, you need to have hip extension. Bring your hips forward. This movement itself is great for glute exercises because it really focuses on the glutes and makes it's basically all glute work at that point.
Yes, and again, you notice that we set a wide stance similar to the sumo deadlift, where we want to shorten that range of motion to make it so that way, in this case, we're trying to minimize the amount of quad involvement that we have, right? So we have to do a lot of knee extending as well to get up, but by widening that stance, we are making it a little bit easier for us to target our glutes. And all we want to think about is when targeting the glutes is when you're at that bottom position, once you hit that parallel mark, as soon as you hit that, you're squeezing your glutes all the way up to the top until you're back to an upright position.
And at number 5, we have cable pull-throughs. Cable pull-throughs are perfect because once again, starting position, you're going to be hips flexed, and you're using your glutes to really drive them forward and bring your hips forward. And this would be perfect as the movement requires your glutes pretty much the whole entire time.
Cool. And some cues for this one, just want to keep those knees bent about shoulder width apart. And then you want to think about initiating the movement by sticking your butt backwards. So sticking your butt out. So that way you can get that flexed position. And then in order to get you back to upright, you're going to squeeze your glutes all the way from back to front until you become upright again. All right, guys, that wraps it up for today's video, going over the top 5 best glute exercises. Just to kind of wrap things up, we started off with the anatomy to help us better understand what the glutes are responsible for. So that way we can pick a list that matches their actions, right? The common theme was the exercise either had to do with hip extension or hip abduction or hip external rotation. And since those are all the movements that your glutes are responsible for, that's how we came up with this list right here, alongside some of our personal experience as well.
All right, guys, thanks for watching today's video. We know we use a lot of gym equipment that not everyone has access to, but if you want to see our top 5 glute exercises for at home, go ahead and leave a like button down below. And if your top 5 list does not match with our top 5 list, go ahead and leave a comment down in the comment section below and tell us what is your top 5. What did you think we left out in today's video? All right, guys, see you next time.
Peace.
Peace.